So, we are coming to the um, bhakti end, obstacles on the path of bhakti. Same thing that we asked, worry and anxiety until the viveka comes. And when the viveka comes, we realize that Narayana is the only refuge. I'm saying Narayana here because this is from the Bhagavatam. It can be Shiva, it can be Allah, it doesn't matter who, what name you give it. But Paramatma is the only refuge and only reality. Everything else comes and goes, comes and goes. So when you say all these sorrows, what I'm suffering comes from the beloved. That's how the Sufis call Paramatma. They call him the divine beloved. And you said this is your Maya alone. And the Bhakta has already surrendered to the divine. Then you tell yourself, I have laid everything at your feet. So I'm not worried about anything. He will take care. That gives you a sense of um, morale boosting. So you are able to handle your anxiety with that sort of an attitude, which comes not by just telling yourself intellectually or because somebody tells you, but you have had some little difficulty helped in some way. So you think to yourself, oh, it has happened to me, that he has helped me at this point. So the next time it comes, you remember that and you tell yourself, last time I was helped. Last time I went through a difficulty, I came back stronger. So even now I can do it. So that way, give yourself self-confidence. So bhakti helps that confidence. Even when you think I'm helpless, you have so many stories, so many friends who might have gone through difficulties, so many satsangs where you hear that people have been helped. So that gives you a little boost to handle anxiety. And when your anxiety gets less and less and less, then your bhakti will become more and more. Then the other thing is, you must not leave out your worldly activities in the beginning. There are people who will say, drop everything and go away. Go stay in an ashram. Go stay in the forest. And Paramatma is telling you, he knows exactly what is needed for our unfolding. You know, it's like if you sow a seed in the soil, in the beginning, you can't pull out the sapling and make it suddenly grow into a tree. It has to struggle against the earth. It has to break through the surface of the earth and it has to come. And it is that which gives it strength slowly to become a tree later. And Paramatma gives us certain situations to exhaust the existing vasanas. And he gives us the equipment and the situation so that we can get a chance to purify ourselves. Purify means go away from our conditioning by working out our karmas. So the sorrows and difficulties and pleasant things, everything will come. But a true devotee will not worry about it. Because I have given my profits and losses to you. So you have to take care and you know what I want. You have put me in this situation. Give me the patience and the strength to go through with it. That is why when Arjuna wanted to leave the battlefield, Krishna said, no, pick up your bow and arrow and go and fight. Why? Because he had come to that situation and he had to learn something. So you cannot leave worldly activities and run away. But same time, you don't have to live miserably either. Once we know that he is with us and wherever he puts us, he will help us to fulfill the um, purpose for which we have come. Because the whole world is Paramatma himself. So slowly, slowly that sadhana deepens. And once sadhana deepens, then we start becoming more surrendering. And then you think back about it and you think, what a good thing it has happened, these difficulties. Think of your children, that any of you who have children, when the child learns to walk, You don't say, oh, he'll fall on the ground, let us carry him all the time. You will cripple him, no? But if you teach him to walk, he will fall few times and he might even cry because the father or mother is not picking him up. But sooner or later, he will learn to walk. And if he is going to the Olympics one day, he will say that the start was given to me by my father or my mother who taught me to walk. Because one thing we have to remember, nothing remains permanent. Everything is anitya in the world. So, this is the second one. Do not give up your worldly activities. Whatever is there, it will give you up when the time comes. That is the most important thing. For example, I used to work in Nimhans as a psychiatrist. And then I wanted to leave it and go to the ashram by myself. And Swamiji said no. He said, continue working. So I worked for 1.5 to 2 years. Then I took up private practice. I went and sat in one nursing home for 3 months. And I didn't have a single patient. One day, they said, you have a patient who has come. So I was surprised who has come. Then it was the Swamiji, when Swami Buddhananda used to be here. He came there. He said, I thought I'll come and cheer you up because you had nobody else coming. So around that time, I realized that karma was over. Then you have to move on. But if I had left and gone, I would still be doing something in the ashram related to this. So wait, have patience. The thing that you're attached to, the thing that is attached to you, will have to drop you and go. You don't have to push it away. So that is the second thing. The third thing, do not listen to descriptions of misery or people who say, I don't believe in all this rubbish and I don't believe this is all superstition. You know, if you're a liberal secular person, for example, don't waste your attention unnecessarily. Don't try to prove differently for the mind. Don't try to convert them. You mind your business and you carry on. Everybody has a right to their opinion. You have a right to yours. You know, when you listen to so many of these things, sometimes what happens, you'll get caught up in the temptations. There is a story of Ananda and Buddha. Ananda was Buddha's close disciple. Then, and those days, the training for the monks was that they have to look down and walk, and they will look down for about 6 one stride, that much. And then they will say that if any woman comes and talks to you, don't talk to them. That was the beginning. So one day Ananda came and he told the Buddha, he said, I have a doubt. Buddha says, what's your doubt? So he says, supposing a woman comes and tells me the way to Mithila, what should I do? You can hear me, no? Hello?
Yes, Swamiji, we can hear.
Okay. So he says, supposing a woman comes and asks me the way to Mithila, what do I do? Don't talk, Ananda, he said. And after some time, Ananda comes back and he says, supposing this lady says that I have a great emergency to go to Mithila, please tell me the way. What do I do? Don't talk, Ananda. And after some time, Ananda says, supposing she comes and tells me that if I don't go and it's an emergency and you don't tell me the way to Mithila, then I'm going to be in very serious trouble. Then he says, then don't talk, Ananda. Then after some time, Ananda comes back and then he says, supposing this lady says, I have to go, it's an emergency, I will be in serious trouble if I don't go. And if you don't tell me the way, I'm going to jump off the hill and kill myself. Then what do I do? Then Buddha says to Ananda, then you can tell her, Ananda, but be alert. Why does he say that? Because there is no woman. It is Ananda's anxiety that if it happens, what to do? Why is he anxious about it? Because deep down, there is a need for him to go talk to the woman. If the woman comes, what should I do? Otherwise, he can think about so many things. But the Buddha would sit and he would talk to there was a dancer in that place, Amrapali. They took a movie also, I think. So he would sit and he would laugh and he would talk and all that. It didn't bother him. Why? Because he was not attracted this way or that way. He saw every person as the divine, as a Buddha. So to him, it was not a woman, a man, somebody is sorrowing, somebody is happy, somebody is attractive. He didn't see the differences. So in the beginning, you might have training like that. So he says, so they say, the world comes, the world goes. Don't give it too much serious attention. Let your inner mind be tuned to Narayana in this context. Give up pride. Give up vanity. And there's Abhimana, Damba, Adi, and such other negative qualities, because what do you have to be proud about? What do you have to be vain about? You will only be proud or vain when you are identifying with your physical body. If you realize that your physical body also is changing, it's temporary, then you won't bother about it. You won't say she is prettier than me, he is stronger than me, because one day he will also be weak. The other person will also be old, ugly. So he says, but sometimes you can't help it because you have these 6 enemies like Kama, Krodha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, Lobha. All these are present when the mind is present. So you can't get rid of the mind because mind is needed to cultivate bhakti. So what to do now? You're stuck. So then they are saying, turn the mind towards the Paramatma. Make it your Ishta Devata, whoever it is. If you have Kama desire, turn your desire towards Narayana. I want him. Be greedy for Narayana alone. Be angry with him for not coming to you, or be angry with yourself for not going close to him. So that way you, it's called sublimation in yoga, in psychiatry. That is, if you have a particular quality, you turn it towards the world, you will have problems. But if you turn the same thing towards the Paramatma, over a period of time, these things will go down. Then they says, don't get into vain disputation or arguments. Do not enter into that, because by argument you cannot prove the truth. You have to experience it. Whoever has an argument, every argument will be inconclusive. Why? Because arguments are logical. Only somebody who has experienced it will understand. So they say, don't waste your time in disputation and arguments. And do you know anybody in today's world who does not get into this argument to prove that they are actually doing the right thing, how wonderful they are? Anybody?
Swamiji, pardon. Actually, some of them did not heard the question. Can you repeat the question?
I'm saying, do you know anybody in today's world who does not waste time proving that they are actually doing the right thing? And if you somebody goes on blaming them, they don't turn around and say, actually, I'm doing the right thing, I'm good. And they don't go on explaining themselves. They just go on doing what they need to do. Do you know anybody in today's world?
I think everyone is doing it.
Everybody is doing. Supposing somebody tells you you're not studying properly, do you say yes, I'm not studying, or do you say of course I'm studying properly, or do you just keep quiet and go on studying or doing whatever you need to do? Shall I give you one example?
Yes, sir.
Swamiji,
Your pride. Kids are a bit like that. Kids will also argue sometimes, and they'll tell you, of course I'm studying, why do you say I'm not studying, like that. One person that you will see in your newspaper every now and then is your prime minister. You think of all the negativity that people say about them. Do you ever see him standing up and explaining himself and saying, actually, I didn't mean that because I did this because of that, and things like that?
Modi ji?
He doesn't waste time arguing or proving that he is actually doing the right thing and I'm a good person, I care. He doesn't do all that. He just goes on. With all the negativity that is thrown at him, he has never bothered.
Right.
So it's like that. People can go on saying nasty things about you, but if you are with the Satyam or Dharma, then you don't have to worry. You don't have to prove yourself to anybody. But same time, you can think about it and wonder, is that person right? You give it thought. Maybe I am doing something wrong. You give it thought and you change yourself. But you don't have to stand up and have an argument about it. That's what they're saying.
Excuse me. Can we have others in mute? I see Shivani Maheshwari ji, Shalini ji, Pooja ji not in mute, because of which we are hearing the disturbances.
Oh, that's why you hear the sound. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think now everyone is.
I was wondering, I was worried whether it is the technology part. Okay. So these are the things. Give up pride, give up vanity, not because it's supposed to be a holy thing to do, because you look at it logically and say, what do I have to be proud about? If it is because I'm a very beautiful person, it's because the Panchabhutas have come into this combination in this body to make it look beautiful. If I'm ugly, then the Panchabhutas have come in this combination to make this body ugly. Why? Because there is something there that has to be learned. Then he says, don't get into vain disputation and arguments. And then he'll say, reflect upon the Bhakti Shastras. Because when you see how some people are behaving now, like for example, somebody asked, that why should we need to pray to Rama or do the Ramanama when Rama himself is suffering? So what you do then, you want to know something like that, read the particular Shastra, say the Ramayana in such a situation, and reflect deeply upon it. Don't just go by what our social conscience tells us. To ask yourself, is there any other way to see this? When you do things like that, it is vichara, you reflect upon it, then you will realize what the truth is in your mind. And when you understand that, the vichara will take you to achara. That is, those instructions are practiced. And they say that when the devotion or bhakti is fulfilled, bhakti and Vedanta are the same. You just come by two different paths. Then they say, because we are coming again and again to this birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, don't waste time, they're saying. Kshanardham api. That is, ardham kshana. Not even half a moment should be wasted, because you don't know how a destructive vasana can come up if the mind is not integrated and if the achara, that discipline, is not there. So Achara Shuddhi is important. So what is the essence of all sadhana? They will tell you, Sarvada, always, at all times, in all places, under all conditions, Sarva Bhavana, that is, in all aspects of our personality, conscious mind, subconscious mind, it has soaked into us. Nischintitaihi, freedom from chinta, worries. That is, always, in all places, under all conditions, in all parts of our personality, we are free from worries. Why? Because if you are superficially, you might put on a very calm face, but inside you might be terribly worrying, and suddenly it will explode in somebody's face. So inside also, don't be worried, he says. Why? Bhajaniya, a very important word. Bhajaniya means you invoke the Bhagavan. Bhagavan eva bhajaniya. Invoke the Lord alone. You don't invoke stress. If you go on saying, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm worried, I'm worried, I'm worried, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, you're not invoking the Paramatma. You're invoking the fear. You're invoking the stress. So they are saying, invoke the Lord alone in all times, in all places, under all conditions, from every part of your prayer. Don't just be superficial. Say it, trust and say, please come. At least I've heard that even if you don't believe, you can say, I've heard that you are somebody who will help, somebody who can protect. It's almost time. So please come and help me. And show that there is a person like you. I haven't even told you the story. Okay. So these are the conditions. They say the difficulties that come, and the essence of all sadhana is this. And chanting and bhajans. Now, I want to tell you something about chanting and bhajans, because bhajans and chanting should not be done in a speed. There is no virtue in saying, I did 100 times Om Namah Shivaya in 3 minutes or 5 minutes. That is an ego-based situation. Somebody does it in 3 minutes, I have to do it in 2 minutes. It's like, how quickly can you turn the Rubik's Cube? When you are chanting, supposing you're saying Hare Krishna chanting, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. What are you doing? You're calling Krishna, you're calling Rama, you're saying, please come and sit next to me. Supposing, say I'm calling Sridhar, I want to call him home. I say, Sridhar, come and sit inside. Sridhar, come and sit inside. Sridhar, come and sit inside. I might say it 200 times, but I'm sure Sridhar won't feel like coming and sitting in my house. So when you want to call somebody, call with affection, call with love, call with kindness, call seeming as though you have all the time in the world for that person to come. So they won't think, oh, she's in such a hurry, so let me go and come back quickly. So when you call the Paramatma, when you're doing a chanting, say that chanting from your heart and do it slowly and with Shraddha. That is what they are saying. Otherwise, it makes no point just chanting for the sake of chanting. So here, that is why they say, one mantra, one guru, ananya bhakti. Don't go on for 5 different forms. So, and how can you call God in what way? They are saying there are 11 ways of calling him. One way is like talking about his wonderful qualities. You know, so when you go to Munger and somebody and some students come back, they say, you know, Swamiji was so terrific. He gave a lecture that day. He was sitting so quietly. What a nice voice, etc., etc. That is glorifying the divine qualities of the Lord. So this is like Narada and Shuka Brahman and Vyasa. That is one way of approaching Parabrahman. The other way, the second way is Rupa, attachment to the form. That is the people of Mithila, when they saw Rama, they said, what a good looking person. So you look at the form of your Ishtadevata and you enjoy that form. That is Rupa. Then some people like to do puja, devoted ritual and seva. It's like Bharata did puja to Sri Rama's Paduka. So you can do it like that. Then you have Smarana. These are called Ashaktis, approaches. Smarana, what you like doing is constant remembrance. Whatever you're doing, it'll be constantly on your mind. Supposing you love cricket, whatever you're doing, even if you're sitting in the class, you'll be thinking, I wonder who's winning it, how many runs he made. Like that. This is Smarana. Dasya Ashakti. Dasya is like Hanuman and Vidura, being a servant, wanting to serve. Sakhya Ashakti, being a friend, a companion. Like Arjuna was with Krishna, Kuchela was with Krishna. Kanta Ashakti. Kanta means the wife. I am the Lord's beloved. This was how the 8 queens of Krishna experienced. Then Atma Nivedana Ashakti. It's a total self-offering. It's like Hanuman was to Rama. He had no personal agenda at all. Tanmaya Ashakti. Tanmaya Ashakti is feeling oneness with him. That was like the Sanat Kumara, Sanandana. They felt that they were the divine. Then Parama Viraha Ashakti. Parama Viraha is that sense of separation and the feeling of missing when Krishna left Vrindavan that the Gopikas felt in the beginning. These are 11 ways of relating to the divine.
First question was, what are the life lessons we need to learn from Rama, which can be used in our daily lives? Or why do we have to pray Rama when he himself was always into suffering?
Now, life lessons about Rama, if you hear my Ramayana, no? I've sent you that clipping. Yes, along the way, you will learn. And at the end of it, if you have a difficulty, I'll tell you about it because it's a big lesson. It'll take 2 or 3 classes. So you can't say it in short. But basically, to remember that Rama showed how a normal human being can follow dharma. You don't have to be a devata for that. As a normal human being, how was dharma followed in those days? So that is the basic thing that we can learn from Rama. Life lessons.
Like the circumstances he faced, we need to learn from them.
Yes, and how he handled it. Okay. How each one he handled. But for that, you must go little deeper into Ramayana too. You have to walk with Rama and find out why he said what he said. Because usually, sometimes people will say, oh, how did he ask Sita after all that to get into the fire and prove herself? That is not, it doesn't go well with the modern female activists. But when you read the whole Ramayana, you will realize that Rama never asked her to get into the fire. Sita said to Lakshmana, light the fire, I will enter it and show them, she said. And also the fact that he was not worried, and Lakshmana looked at Rama's face. Rama was not worried either because Rama knew she was literally Tripura Sundari. That is what you'll understand at the end of the Ramayana. And so he knew that no fire can touch her. But he also wanted to show the people that this is the way it is, so that he doesn't leave her feeling little anxious. He doesn't leave people feeling anxious because he has to establish dharma and he's a model for the people. He takes his calling as the king very seriously. It's a situation of responsibility and he does not want anybody to follow a wrong way of behavior. So that was one reason. And secondly, by himself, he was a very dharmic person. So in every situation, he handled it in very specific ways. So when you understand it from the Rama perspective and the Treta Yugam of those days, then you will understand why he did what he did. But that takes you have to go a little deep in the Ramayana. That's number 1. Number 2 is, he didn't suffer. Half the thing was, the only time he actually suffered was when Sita was taken away. And that there is a tattva in that 17 chapters. They show him grieving and grieving. Where is Sita? Where is Sita? He's asking the trees, the plants, just like Vyasa asks, where are you, Shukha Brahman, for when his son went away. And the trees and plants answered and said, are you calling us? Are you calling us? Because Shukha was the Brahman, the cosmic consciousness. He had already gone into it. So he was, as he passed the trees became Brahman. He was constantly vibrating and they started answering. So that is the deeper, subtler aspect where Rama is concerned when he was grieving for Sita going away. It was actually the tattva of that is just as the Jivatma, that is Sita in that role, goes through the viraha, that is a separation agony of being away from the Paramatma, that is Rama in that situation. The Valmiki is trying to show how the Paramatma also grieves for the Atma, saying, I'm giving you so many opportunities, I'm giving you difficulties, I'm giving you pleasures, I'm giving you everything so that you can come back to me, and you're not coming back still. So they say more than, there is a statement in English, no, more than the calf wants to suckle, does the cow yearn to, more than the calf wants to suck, does the cow yearn to suckle. That is, like a guru is more concerned about Sishya than Sishya is about the guru. In the same way, the Paramatma is more concerned about the Jivatma suffering and struggling and taken away into the material world, which is what Sita's kidnapping was about. She was carried away into a place that was full of the material prosperity, but Rama was not there. So the soul that gets seduced by the material world and gets stuck there and wants to come back to the Paramatma, but does not know how to come back. And Hanuman then comes there as the guru and gives her the ring and reassures her and does the Sita Kalyanam on a subtle level there itself. That's the third Sita Kalyanam there. So you have to understand that Rama by himself did not suffer the way we think we suffer. They're only talking about how much the Paramatma cries for the presence of the Jivatma. That is what that tattva is about.
Okay. One more question was that. At certain point of life, individual feels clueless about his life and wants to understand the purpose of his existence, why this feeling comes and how to deal and overcome.
Everybody will have that feeling at certain times when you're most sensitive and vulnerable in life. It is what is called an existential anguish. That is existence. It has to do with existence. Why are you existing here? What have you come for? Actually, the Shastras say you have come to finish certain karmas so that you can go back to your source. That is the Paramatma. And this anxiety will come up in many people at different times in life, especially when they are going through a difficult phase. Why did I get into this mess? What should I do? That sense of cluelessness, helplessness comes because it is the Maya. And it comes for everybody at different times in life. It's very normal, very natural. When it comes, the thing to do is to sit down and think about what is it that you really want in life. Why are you suffering? Then you'll find it's because of some expectation, some desire that you had, which is not satisfied. The desire even can be so that you are in control of your own life and not to have other people telling you do this, do that, or you're pushed by society into something, whereas you wish to do something else. The lack of your freedom, that liberty. But the lack of your freedom will not come by just thinking about it or doing something about it. It is a way Mahamaya creates situations so that you can go on again and again finding out what you want, and eventually you realize the only thing Nityam is Paramatma. So you turn your material desires into spiritual desires. And then when you have that sort of feeling that you know that what is the Atma is the only thing that is permanent, and the divine, the supreme, is the only refuge for the Atma, then you live in that feeling. And when bhakti comes, you're quite comfortable. You say, anyway, he will take care of me. And then you will see how he takes care of you. He'll take care of your family. He'll take care of your children. Then at that time, you will think, why did I sit and worry about all this anyway? If I had realized it earlier, not known, we all know intellectually. If I had realized it earlier, I would not have suffered so much, we would say. So the only solution is to move towards finding the source of what is bothering you and to handle it then and there. Sometimes that handling it can be very painful, more painful than the problem itself. But if you want a lasting solution, you have to go through that pain and then go beyond it. In simple words, you can keep chanting Omkar, as I told you the other day. Breathing in, breathing out, Om, Om, whenever you're doing any work, whenever you're doing anything, then that will give you a break from the problems that are worrying you. So slowly you will start worrying less and less. Or another way to do it is by helping somebody else. I can tell you of many instances, but one particular instance about which I had written 35 years ago was a young boy who lost his mother or father, I don't remember. Young boy, and he had come for psychiatric counseling because he went into a deep depression. Young boy means what? Teens, may have been 12, 13, something like that. So they put him on antidepressants and all that. It didn't completely help him. It helped him a little bit, but not much. And then that was when I met Swami Satyananda. So at that time, we came across a idea, why not give him a chance to do something for other people? So, and he liked collecting stamps. So I asked him to collect the stamps and then put it in certain categories and all that, and go and help other people who feel lonely, like older mothers who have just lost their children, things like that, so that he can help them feel better. And in a short time, maybe about 3-4 months, he was going around and he was helping the other people. See, when you tell somebody something, you are also telling yourself the same thing. If I'm taking a class and telling you something, I'm telling myself that I'm also listening to my voice. So when you go around reassuring and helping other people, you're reassuring yourself also. So suddenly this boy found that he was, instead of being a victim, he could be a protector by helping other people, and soon his difficulty went away. So it's always found that when you go around helping other people, helpless people, you will be able to get over your own personal anguish. That is one way to handle it. It gives you a purpose. It keeps your mind away from emotional distress. And one thing you should never do if you get into a clinical depression, never, never, never advise them to do Yoga Nidra.
Why is it that Samachi, why she should not advise Yoga Nidra?
Why you should not do? I'm glad you asked. Because when you're in deep depression, you are almost tamasic. Your prana is at a very low level. Right now, what you have to do to get over it is to raise your prana. So when you're in a depressive state and when you're very sad and you're, helpless, you're not at all rajasic, then what you need to do is get up and do something dynamic. For example, you can either go, if you're a swimmer, you go swimming, or you do running, or you do, if you are just sitting at home, then you can wash your clothes the good old way, not like in a washing machine. When you lift it and hit it on the stone, that sort of thing. Or you can work in the garden by using that spade and digging, things like that, which are dynamic actions, which will raise the rajasic element. You will slowly move out of depression. Or going for brisk walks like that. But when you're depressed and you sit down and do yoga nidra, what happens is when you will be giving your own visualization, that person after some time mind will drift because mind is tamasic at that level. It is not interested. So when the mind drifts, it will go back into the thing that is depressing it. And you go on imagining, it's like that chewing gum. No, you go on thinking more and more about the things that depress you, and you will go into worse depression. That is why you don't do yoga nidra or meditation when you are depressed and when you're very anxious, like on a panicky level. If you're just lightly anxious, you can do both. It's good. That's the reason you don't do yoga nidra when you are depressed, or when anybody is depressed, you don't ask them to do it, because the depression may be such that with yoga nidra, they will go on imagining, fantasizing what has happened, and suddenly you might find yourself with a suicidal case on your hands.
Is it for all the universal depression?
No, it is something that you have to be cautious about if it's a clinical depression. See, there are two types of depressions. One is a clinical depression, another is a reactive depression. Reactive depression is when some crisis comes in your life, and say you have a sudden financial, very big loss, or a debt, or your child gets seriously sick, or somebody dies in your family. That is a reaction, or you have a quarrel with somebody whom you care for very much. This is a reactive nature. That is okay, because then you can do something about it. That is not necessarily there you can do a yoga nidra. But when you think of when that crisis pushes down your serotonin levels in the blood, then you get what is called clinical depression. And the clinical depression has very specific features. When you have clinical depression, then you do not do this practice or advise anybody to do it. If you are in doubt, send them to a doctor or a psychiatrist, or when you finish your psychiatric training in Richmond Fellowship, you yourself will be able to find out what is a reactive depression, what is a clinical depression, and then you can send a clinical depression and work along with the doctor. So that is another way we work along with doctors, so that not only we learn their skills, they learn our skills also. You learn in which cases the doctor will prescribe antidepressants, how much, why, what time, and he will learn what are the dynamic asanas you can prescribe in such conditions. So that way we exchange skills, and then we have a better understanding with the doctors. So tomorrow when you have patients, you can go like an equal with the doctors, and you can help your people who come to you with difficulties. That's why the curriculum of mental illness is also added in your YTTC. Because a lot of people who come to spiritual life come with problems, mental problems. And those might be bordering on the mental periphery. You can fall this side or that side. Or they may be just ordinary problems which need counseling also, or just emotional support. So you must know which one is what, so that you don't do the wrong thing for each thing. And remember that whatever diagnosis is given, every person is a unique human being. You can never generalize, especially on the path of yoga and medicine. It's different when you're working with computers or you're working with screws and nuts. Then you can generalize. You can say the square nut will go only into a square peg or whatever. But you can't do that with human beings. Because human being is continuously a fluid person, no? Things are constantly changing minute to minute. So you can't generalize. Every person is absolutely unique. That's why you can't even compare.
Swamiji, I had
Yes.
one question.
Mm.
Yeah,
Ask.
actually in the last class, you had mentioned that we should totally avoid like dussanga, like bad association
Aha.
avoid negative
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Mm.
But if it is like in the family itself, then how do you deal
Mm.
with it? Because on a regular basis, like somebody is negative, there's no way like you can
Mm. There are two
away
things.
from the person also. How do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two things. One thing is, I didn't say you should totally avoid. I said usually you should totally avoid when you are vulnerable. Supposing you know somebody in your family, you're living with them and they're constantly negative. You have to do two things.
Yeah.
First, sit and contemplate, nididhyasana. Find out whether you have any role in that person being negative. Secondly,
Okay.
because without realizing, you may be demoralizing the other person. So then you can change yourself to make the other person feel better. The second thing is, find out if it has nothing to do with you and it is their own personal problem because of which they are a particular way. You can find out what you can do to cheer them up to do something different. Maybe if they come and start talking about something miserable and it bothers you, then you can shift the topic. Listen to them, nod your head so that they don't feel you're rejecting them. Listen, how do I to understand that? I've also gone through it. By the way, did you see what is given in the paper today? That joke there was. So like that, you shift the topic away so that the person, you're helping that person not to sit with that problem. Unless it's a problem you feel you can help to solve. Supposing somebody has lost a job in the house and they're miserable about it, you can't sit and joke with them, no, because they will have to pay their rent, they will have to educate their children, so they'll be really worried. So find out if there is anybody you know who can help out. So like this, we have to see what each person needs in a particular situation and see if we can fulfill it. If we can't do anything about it, then try to help them to not come and disturb your equanimity. So when they come to talk to you, just say 2-3 sentences which are supportive and then shift the topic to something else. The point why you're moving away from them is not to because something is bad about them. It's because you don't want to get your samatva bhavana disturbed. So slowly over a period of time, when they come and sit in your presence, they will start feeling at peace. Sometimes people who are not able to express their difficulty to some other people might express to you because they feel that you are much more understanding and helpful. And that will be your karma also, that you are needed there to be compassionate and helpful to the other person. And if all that compassion is making you feel worse and your mind is getting disturbed because you are identifying with that person, then move away from that person. Or worst comes to worst, you can sit there and while you're talking or listening, you just go on chanting your pranava omkar as you're breathing in and out silently. That will give you a bit of a distance. They will also start feeling a bit better. But each case you have to see individually how to handle. But it doesn't help if you stick to that person, get to be part of that person's problem, go on being miserable, and before you know what, you will be negative. So don't do that.
Okay.
Also, if you can go to somebody who's a little more positive and reassuring, like at least once in 3-4 days, or you can get on the phone, speak to somebody like that, then you can balance that negativity if you can't do anything else.
Okay. Thank you, Swamiji.
You're welcome.
Swamiji, one question.
Yeah.
So it's related to the Paramatma. So we say that at the beginning of the creation, Paramatma becomes many from one.
Yeah.
And at the end, all of it merges back into Paramatma.
Mm.
So is there any reason why it is happening? Like, is there anything which God wants to be by becoming many and then merging all of that into himself?
That I don't know because I haven't reached that level. But what the Shastra says is, our logic is only part of till the mind, manas. That is your indriyas and the manas. Till then logic. Why something happens, we want to know. Why do we want to know? Because it is part of survival technique. Why is it when a man crosses a stream, he drowns? Think of it as, million years ago when man is just getting on his feet. He might say, yesterday he was here, he went into that thing and he went inside and never came back. So what do? You say, oh, okay, maybe he didn't know how to cross. So 2 more people go there and they too drown. Then you say, oh, we have to learn to be like the fish. So you learn swimming. So like that, you understand. What did you ask me? I forgot the question.
It was so is there any reason why God becomes
right.
many, or the creation
Yeah.
happen, or is there no
Correct.
reason? It's just play kind of thing?
They say it is play, but the
Yeah.
point is, the reason we want to know is there any reason, is because we are using our left brain, the logical brain, which says I want to find out a reason, because reason always and logic always gives you a sense of stability in life. We know because of this will happen. So that is logic. And when you know that, if you don't want that thing to happen, you avoid this thing. So it gives you a sense of stability, it gives you a sense of security, and it also gives you a sense of survival. So it's an old vasana to use logic. But there are some things in life where logic will not work. The right brain, for example, is not logical at all. For example, if you are coming from work and you step into your house, suddenly you get very annoyed about something. And it's not logical. And you might think to yourself, why am I getting so angry? There's nothing that anybody here has bothered me about. Why am I upset? Or suddenly you feel very sad when you're listening to some sad song. There's no logic to it. So that is the way your right brain will work, right side of your brain, right hemisphere. Now, some things are without reason. That is how the right brain tackles it. Some things need logic. That is how the left brain tackles it. And then there are some situations when you balance both, when you go to the Paramatma, you find that all contradictions exist in the same person. It's something like quantum physics, no? You say a thing can be either, Newton says, a thing can be either a particle or it can be a wave. Something cannot be a particle, one point sitting there and moving at the same time. But quantum physics says it can be. And if you're looking at something, it can be a particle, and I'm looking at the same thing at the same time, it can be a wave for me. That is, its consciousness and my consciousness are linked. All our consciousness is linked. So just by looking, we can change certain things. So now these contradictions of Newton find that quantum physics carries both the contradictions comfortably. So Paramatma is like that. Logic is up till a certain level. That too is only up till the level of the words we speak. When an emotion comes in, logic goes out of the window and the right brain takes over because it's in charge of the emotional mind. And so logic has no place to it. So we don't know why Paramatma does it. I suppose when we merge with Paramatma, we will know that.
Okay.
At which time you won't come back.
Follow-up question to that is, I'm sorry, I'm asking too many questions.
Yeah. No, ask as many as
So
you like.
if God becomes many, let's say he creates this existence and comes into it.
Not
So
if.
yeah,
Not
so
if
he comes
create and he comes into it.
Okay. So there, let's say there might be a reason which we don't know. Okay. So is it, so shouldn't we just stay here and be in this existence till all of it merges back, or why should we
You
try
can,
to?
but we don't have to try. The only problem is that since we are staying long without understanding him, and we go on getting into one mess after the other, and we suffer. So because we suffer, we are saying, now let us find out why we are suffering. It's like being, supposing you're in charge of a vehicle. That vehicle has to carry somebody from here to, say an aeroplane has to carry somebody here from here to California. It's people who have been migrants like here. No, because you are the one who is repairing. If one screw is loose, you have to know, you have to put it, because not only for yourself, you are responsible for a whole lot of people, a whole country sometimes, and then a whole globe because of the country, and whole of the environment, whole of existence. You know, it might be that supposing I don't wash my hand, for example, I go out, come back, I don't wash my hand. I contract corona from somebody, I give it to somebody else. That somebody gives to somebody else. And then that person is not alive. Then what happens to his family? And then what happens to, supposing he has a farm which is giving him existence? Who is there to run that farm? So like this, you know, so many things are interlinked. So we have a responsibility to everything. So we can sit, but we'll go on suffering and we'll make everybody else suffer around us as time goes by. So we look for something. That's the difference. Otherwise, you can sit, nothing wrong. If you can handle that suffering and you say, okay, it's all fun for me, then you're Paramatma, no? You've reached that level. So then it's okay. You can sit through. That's what he does. He sits till the last person or the last manifestation is ready to go, or pralaya will come. That is the beauty, because he gives us the choice. It's like a child asking, you know, that you're saying, I must know the road rules. Say about 3-year-old child, your house is on the national highway and the child wants to go out. Why so many cars are going, so many cows are going, people are going, why can't I go out? Then you said, if you don't know the road rules, the vehicle will run over you. Then the child will tell you, anyway, someday the vehicle or somebody is going to run over. So why not I go and stand now? What will you say? Because if it runs over the child, it's not only the child that will go, the parents will also suffer, no? And the family, then the car man will suffer. Maybe he'll go to jail. So we are so linked. That's why we start. This Advaita, actually life is Advaita. We are all one. We think we are separate, that's all.
Small question. She
Yeah,
wants to
yeah.
ask.
Sure.
Vishwasani, please.
Just a minute. Why do we get dreams about school, school friends, exams as adults?
Usually when you have an examination as an adult, and then exam is related to school, so schools and examination will come together. And usually, sometimes you'll feel you're going for an examination, you're not doing properly, or you're failing, or you miss the examination when you're going. That shows that you're anxious that somewhere you have lost out on something in life. That's how it is generally, but dreams will always have to be interpreted with the person themselves, because we have to know what their problem is and then explain it. But generally, this is how it is thought. It can be like missing an examination or running to catch a train and missing the train. That is, you missed out something. So the subconscious mind is alerting you to that, so that if you want, you can rectify it. That is why we have dreams. Dreams are when whatever you have repressed in the conscious mind, we are putting on acts, no? Everywhere in life, you want to be pleasant to your mother-in-law, you want to be pleasant to your child, you want to be pleasant to your husband, otherwise it's going to be unpleasant overall. So inside you may be resenting something and you might be behaving in a particular way. So that resentment, what happens? It builds up. You have to bring it out. So it is a helpful nature of the dream consciousness to bring it out and let it go. But if you sit and now, why did I think about it? Why did I have that dream? Am I feeling guilty? Then you're getting attached to it. Then you're not letting go of the repression. You're giving it more energy. But if you say, oh, okay, this is why it happened, and let it go, don't worry about it, then it will go. Then you have that part of that repression is thrown out. And to that extent, you're free.
Swamiji, sometimes it's happened like we dream and the same we see sometimes in reality.
That happens when you're moving into another dimension of consciousness. In the dream world, you will see it is teaching you how in different states you can go beyond the time and space limits of that state. For example, now when you're sitting here, you can only see what is in your room and what is around up to a certain distance. But in a dream state, you can see what is happening, say 20 miles away from you. And if somebody tells you, actually, this is happening, actually, this happened, or this is in space. In time, supposing you see something today, and say 5 days later, you see the same thing happening exactly as it was in the dream. That means in the dream state, you have gone beyond time. No, you're gone beyond that 5 days later. You're already there. So this gives you an idea that in one state of consciousness, your time and space can be different from another state, waking state of consciousness. Then imagine if you go into a cosmic dimension of consciousness, what happens? The space and time you will completely transcend. So you have gone beyond space and time. So when you move into that state, you will be, for example, supposing Krishna or Shiva or somebody is your Ishta Devata, you go beyond time and space. You are in the eternity, eternal. So you are living at the same time as Krishna or Shiva or whoever it is, your Ishta Devata. So that is why people say that when they go into Samadhi, they become one with the Paramatma or the Ishta Devata, because the Ishta Devata is there because they have transcended time. But to get into that, you have to do a lot of dream work and sadhana. But it is one of the techniques.